your turn. To nudge things along. To bring up what needs to be elucidated.
Bill? Yeah, over here. You answered, I was listing, over the last couple weeks, I've been listing more and more questions. You answered a few of them this morning, but one that's still out there is the Dagni or Mikul. And it's kind of like, okay, because of Bodhisattva vow and stuff, it's like, okay, it's usually for the other, for the one who's deceased, is how I had it translated. But it seems like it could be for the dead, it could be for ourselves, but it also seems of use for the dying. And I'm wondering, here we often do it for the deceased on the Wednesday night practice, but we never know when we're dying. And I'm just, and then there's also just the ones who we know are dying now in the process. And it seems that, is there a phrase for the ones who are in the process of dying? And how to go back and forth between these, or just hold all of them as I say it?
Well, if there was you've sort of given a multiple choice.
Yeah.
If there was a category down at the bottom that said all of the above, would you pick that one?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go.
Okay.
But one of the things that came, a small point that came up as you were talking, it's true that we do a lot of prayers in the frame of reference of may it be of benefit to others, may this or that suffering be alleviated. But we also do aspiration prayers. So the Dewa Chen prayer, we're now talking about the prayer that, the condensed Dewa Chen prayer, page 43, which from the perspective of an aspiration prayer, the operative piece there is really, as soon as this life has passed away without the diversion of other births, may I be born there, as in Dewa Chen, and thus behold the face of Amitabha. Dewa Chen being born in a circumstance where all aspects of the circumstance contribute to the complete ripening, Dharma ripening. And you could say, behold the face of Amitabha is really sort of see the real deal, see the face of enlightenment, see enlightenment face to face. So we do this primarily, as you said. It's one of the things. It's the last thing on our bucket list, so to speak, is kicking the said bucket. So making aspirations for what we do when we pass away is an important piece of it. And it just so happens that it's very easy to reorient this to not just our own aspiration, but to harness this, because we can really we sort of cut the groove by understanding our own needs and our own potential suffering and our own potential liberation. We see that face to face, and in that same way, really deeply appreciating that, we're able then to easily transfer this into a very pointed prayer for the benefit of others. Something like that. You want to add in, Dora?
Well, I was just going to add when, we also make prayers, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So if we go to Dewa Chen, it's going to help everybody, not just us. So it's not like we're choosing between help them, help us, but always having all in mind, including ourselves. And then I think this, just by having this custom, which Bill and I learned from Lama Tinley Drupa early on, that it's just it's a way of, sometimes I think, well, I always know someone who's just died or who's died, so how could I ever do it the regular way? But these things are just working with the human mind, where we take when we're especially thinking of someone, when something has grabbed us more, and then we use that opportunity and apply our practice by just focusing that, changing those words and focusing the prayer in that way. But of course, we're always trained that even when we do that, it's not that we're just thinking of that person, because we know there's other beings that just died also that we're not aware of. And so it's always inclusive, and yet we use ourselves, we use other, specific others to help us generate more juice in it. That's how I think of it. And it's a good question, though. I've wondered about somebody in the process of dying, because I don't know, when we learned it, it seemed like it was for somebody who had died, but wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And yet it's also said that it's a good thing to recite when we're dying too. So I think it's maybe it's apropos either way.
So the just to on that same bit of self and other, and the mix for others and also for ourselves. First of all, thank you for elucidating it more, because sometimes when I'm looking at a question or a question appears, my focus grows a little narrow, and it's good to hear the reminder of all the ramifications. But the other thing I've noticed with that same mix of, for those who have died, those who are dying, and for myself, is the sensation lately of doing Chenaezig and being Chenaezig for the benefit of others, for all others. And yet I'm also out there, like, needing the, and so it's very, it's dreamlike in that Chenaezig, looking with the eyes of compassion and being the one that needs the eyes of compassion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a very weird, very much, it's like, oh, just like a dream, where you're inside and outside at the same time.
Within the practice, it's possible to lean in both directions. The aspect of doing the practice where you're making offerings and receiving blessings, particularly thinking, and there might be times when that just like, this is my whole show right now in my practice. I need all the help I can get right now. So sometimes we can lean in that direction, and then other times we can definitely, it just feels, there it is. And usually when we feel filled, then there it is. So.
You used the word play several times this morning, play of the mind or whatever. Is there any special meaning to the word play?
Ropa. There is actually, it is actually formally used. I wasn't using it as though it was an exact translation of something, but the sense of that word is you will find that. You'll come across that in teachings here and there. Like it's kind of the natural play of the mind, the display, but it's more kind of more this kind of the loose and uncontrived arising of what. So just like our experience moment to moment, if we really stop to look at it, it's not some contrived thing. It's this kind of the play of appearances.
So whatever happens in our mind.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it does embody a kind of looseness, kind of freeness that seems to go along with that word.
Do you know what the translation of it is?
Well, the place that my mind goes quickly is to the line in the Dorje Changtoma, the Kagyu lineage prayer, and the part about the union of appearance, emptiness, union of samsara, nirvana, to this meditator who appears in this unimpeded play, who is actually, and it's sort of there isn't, I think, a good way to say it sort of grammatically, concisely correct, because we want to say either this play appears to the meditator, or the meditator is doing this, but it's more like the meditator who appears in the midst of this play and is inseparable from the play too. Unimpeded. Yeah, the unimpeded play that arises. Mangak Robench, yeah. What's that?
The way it's translated in our version, in whose mind this unimpeded play arises.
Yes, yeah. Which is true too, but it's also kind of like it's almost like which half do you want to which part of it do you want to say at the same time, without getting terribly wordy, but. And I've seen it sort of go back and forth. The more recent tide seems to be to this meditator who appears in this unimpeded play.
You used a phrase this morning that captured my attention, that when you were referring to this archaic text, and the phrase was self-sounding mantra. And when we continued on with the practice, I thought, well, maybe it would mean that when one merges with Avalokiteshvara, then the speech of the Bodhisattva, then the speech of the Bodhisattva in that mode would be self-sounding. But I thought there was probably more to that I couldn't guess. And if there is, I'd like to hear you speak on that.
I would love to hear Chenaezig explain this. No, really. Sometimes I say things like that and I'm sort of being ha-ha. But but again, it's really it's in the same vein. To the meditator who appears in this unimpeded play, to the mantra that arises kind of in this, it's kind of the self-arising mantra, that is the way this comes through, the way I'm sort of gathering it, and this, as best I can articulate it at the moment, is this sense that for us, we would say, okay, I'm going to go recite the mantra now. And the mantra being this kind of very concise thing. But when we get and we start to look at things like sounds are the melody of the 6 syllables. All sound, from the point of view of the awakened ones, all sound is kind of intrinsically means the same as the mantra. So it's all resonance. All resonance could communicate the same fundamental awakening. Something like that.
But there's a difference if we say the mantra in a chant and we can hear it audibly with our ear consciousness, but we also can hear a sound that self-arises, not at will and not often, but we can do so. I don't know if it's... I mean, it seemed like self-arising. It seemed like that was part of the this white radiant light that then evolved.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, it seemed like it had an autonomy that phrase captured, and I've never heard the phrase before.
Yeah. I'll see if Dora's feeling brave.
No.
No.
But I mean, I guess I think of it as it feels anyway, it goes towards, that's what happens when you're towards the enlightened side of things, more than exactly what I experience. And maybe it goes towards maybe what is the case more. I mean, like saying if everything is coming from Buddha nature, every appearance is out of that, every sound is mantra. That's the enlightened view of the world, but or that's the state that it would be if I could recognize that. But I can't say I don't think I experience the self-arising mantra.
Yeah, I think it's more in that direction than to just say that it's something that I'm not hearing with my ears. It's something that gets out of the notion of me listening to something, no matter what the source. It's something it's beyond that. Of that, I'm fairly confident. But it's, the bodies of myself are the body of the Noble One. The environment is Dewa Chen. Thought and memory are waves of great intrinsic awareness. It comes in the same, it's beyond the notion, beyond kind of the referential notion of an observer. It's not framed in that same way. I think that's about as good as I'm going to guess about it.
That's fine. I can pass it out from here. Okay. So I had a question on page 44 of the text. We were discussing this at a fairly high level a while back. I'm going to bring it back to the second line down on page 44. As soon as this life has passed away without the diversion of other births, may I be born there. So I'm assuming that that's Dagni
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you're saying Mikyul, would it be may he or she or they
or
be
may the
born there?
deceased? Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to get that set.
I think, yeah, I'd have to look up the words exactly, but from what I recall about it, it's more like the one we're thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a, what's that? Yeah, or object also, Yule, an object. Yes, it is. It's kind of like the one we're thinking of, or the one we're bringing to mind, the one that kind of we're seeing in this, something like that. But I'd have to look it up. But I think it does, some places it's translated "may the deceased," but it's, as far as I know, the words don't actually mean somebody who died.
Visualization.
Yeah, yeah. Bringing to mind. Yeah. We're taking turns on opposite sides of the room. It's fine.
In the 7-branch prayer, there is the line on the bottom of page 20. Until samsara is completely empty, please do not pass into nirvana, but look with compassion upon sentient beings drowning in the ocean of suffering. So I read that recently and read it differently than I have before. And the idea of the possibility of abandonment came through. And I don't know if that makes sense, but just this sense of, wow, we're requesting that sentient beings not be abandoned completely to an ocean of suffering, this ocean of suffering. So I don't want to get bogged down in the concepts of it, but there's a sense that if the bodhisattva was to pass into nirvana, there'd be no access or no influence in samsara.
That's one way that nirvana is talked about in terms of like an extinction, like the end of, if the end of impulses to be reborn as driven by the ignorance and the poisons, if the ignorance and the poisons are solely just that thread is just cut completely, then the cause for future birth is not there. That's one way it's talked about. And this is using that kind of frame of reference. And from the perspective of the Bodhisattva vow, you could say that the only thing that causes a being of deep realization to be born from one life to the next is the Bodhisattva vow. That's you could say, the karmic impetus, the wish to be a benefit for beings. So and if I continue on with doing the Chenaezig Sundays, one of the days I'll focus on the Chenaezig practice as the cycle of birth, life, death, and from that perspective, the Bodhisattva arises, the seed syllable arises, and then the Bodhisattva emerges. The only impetus behind that is bodhicitta. we tend to think of bodhicitta as something we do, we do in this life. Sometimes kind of pejoratively, tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of like our hobby. It's our part-time job. And if we can get to it being a good, steady part-time job, we're probably doing pretty good in this life. But the notion that an entire life would be manifested and taken on solely out of bodhicitta, that the entire life would be that. That's a different frame of reference, and that's kind of where Chenaezig practice goes. But in this case, Patrul Rinpoche says something interesting about this kind of why would we recite something like this apart from kind of these highfalutin metaphysical notions? Why would we recite something like this? He said it's part of the interdependent conditions that are created, that the activity of the bodhisattvas doesn't arise sort of one-sidedly. We have to be kind of active participants for it to really manifest in a deep way. So the extent to which we actually request the bodhisattvas, and Patrul Rinpoche says, we should do this as though the bodhisattvas are sitting there. It's a scene kind of like, you can imagine them sitting around drinking coffee and going, these sentient beings, they just can't, after all we've done for them, they just don't seem to get one look. They don't get anything. They're just wandering. I'm at the end of my rope. I do not know what to do with these beings. Let's just, let's go to Tahiti. Let's go to Bodhisattva Tahiti and call it quits. So he's sort of being kind of funny about it. But we have to do our part in terms of our aspiration and our wish, and in the same way that we pray for the wheel of Dharma to be turned. Whatever teachings are needed for sentient beings, it's actually up to us to kind of step up and be precise and make requests, and even make requests sort of a little bit beyond the edge of what we really know we need. Sort of hope that we'll get the thing that will actually open up something that we don't even see yet. So we have to bring that kind of energy. We're such a kind of a consumerist culture at this point that we tend to think we just sort of, it's kind of like we open up I get the PCC catalog in the mail. I just sort of open it up and kind of look, oh, that's interesting. There's something that they're offering. But this is sort of the thing about turn the wheel of the Dharma. It's sort of the same thing. Why would the bodhisattvas show up and hope that somebody comes to class? It's just, we have to say, Chenaezig, I got a half a dozen people who are really interested in this line about self-sounding mantras. We really don't get it, but it sounds interesting. Would you mind elucidating something that gives us a little access to this? We promised to be there at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Something else happens when it's like that. As opposed to underwater basket weaving. Well, who needs that? I don't care.
Thank you. That's really helpful. What I glean from that is that this is not a passive prayer. Please, please, don't leave us. This is almost a prayer for our own bodhicitta to manifest and develop. Thank you.
Our aspirations in bodhicitta need to have some juice, and these practices are really good ways to cultivate that.
Following up with that, I'm never quite sure when it's enough. When I see something that is unsettling, uncomfortable, whether an aspiration is enough. And when I have to, move to really trying hard to recognize something for what it actually is. And when I have to actually do something that would be outside the realm of traditional practice. Like I see tragedies going on and so on, and is it enough to aspire to help these people? I was always taught when I was an early student not to engage too much in activity, but to try to see things for what they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And not to do a lot of, helpful activity, rescue or, rebuild or whatever, And I never quite sure what a bodhisattva commitment really demands in the way of real bodhisattva activity. What does it really demand of us? On what level?
What is real? What makes bodhisattva activity real?
Yeah, exactly. What is our commitment, and on what level? And is it on all of the levels simultaneously, or just some of the levels, or whatever levels we feel like doing at that time? Or I'm never quite sure how much to engage.
I don't think there is an answer exactly. There's some principles, I think, in the middle of it.
Okay.
But they don't yield fixed answers. But we will, at whatever we do, we will provide our own fixed answer by looking in the rearview mirror and seeing what it was that we actually did. It will become something. But I think one of the principles, there are a couple of principles, one of which is that we need to recognize the extent to which we're capable of spreading confusion in the midst of wanting to do something good.
Mm-hmm.
So just recognizing that, keep an eye on it. Doesn't mean we can get absolutist in the other direction. So, I guess it's the cave for me and nothing else. Well, if it's the cave, then the second principle comes into play that I can think of. What is it that we're actually capable of doing? And whether it's in the cave or in any other form of activity, what are we actually capable of doing? There are kinds of situations where all manner of very particular expertise or physical capability is actually required in a situation, and we may not have that thing. And we may not know anybody who has that thing or be able to contrive circumstances where that can be provided. In the case of going to the cave, we may not have the background or capacity to do more than engage in semi-industrious, intense practice for more than a few hours at a time in a week. That might be our capacity at that time. So part of it is recognizing we can spread confusion, keep an eye on that, recognizing what our capacity is. And in that, we have to have a fair amount of patience so that we don't lose ourselves in creating expectations that are always beyond anything that we can practically engage in, so that we don't get stuck in a feedback loop of that wasn't enough, so maybe I should try something even more dramatic, which isn't enough. And so a sense of it's never enough. And in that sense of it's never enough, we also have to look and say, it's never, the person measuring the never enough is me. So am I doing this to make sure that I feel okay? Or am I actually doing something to be of benefit? So it becomes tricky. That said, I think it's actually really essential that we try stuff. We try to do things that are within the realm of something that we can actually engage in. We try to do stuff with people that we meet, people that we're close with, people that we meet randomly, people that we contrive to meet because we think the situation might produce conditions where we could do something either for them or with them for somebody else, and see how it works out. I think that's important. I think leaving everything in realm of abstraction is not complete. It's incomplete.
It's not enough.
Yeah, whether it's enough or not, it's incomplete.
Okay.
The enough almost, I'm shying away in the moment from the word enough because it sounds like there's some kind of yardstick, but it's we're called on to engage with body, speech, and mind. We go for refuge with body, speech, and mind. We take the bodhisattva vow, body, speech, and mind. We should be kind of engaged in creative ways. And some of us are more inclined or capable of doing different kinds of things. And that's also important to recognize. And if we don't recognize that, we're likely to get lost in everybody trying to do something that, to be slightly pejorative, kind of tweaky, what's become popular to do. This is the thing, this is how we do something, instead of really trying to be creative and thoughtful about it, and try to be open to deeper and deeper ways to engage. And some people will be very creative about how to engage in social and political structures and think in those terms. That's great. Should be done. Some people really should engage in practice, deep, intensive practice. And you can't spend 12 years in a cave and 12 years in a soup kitchen at the same time, or 12 years in the Senate. We'll do one thing at a time. And it's easy to feel like it's never enough. And that can just get in the way of doing anything at all.
Thank you.
I think that if I was to de-wordify myself and say, I would encourage people to do things good-heartedly and energetically and feel good about the effort, so that it might be possible to continue doing even more. Because I think that it's very easy to get discouraged. For those who aren't familiar with the practice, I'd be happy if anybody has basic questions about the process, anything to clarify there, as well as some of these questions are, well, we didn't do this part, but what about the section here that we didn't do? I have questions about that, which is great, but also want to make sure that if there are questions about just how to approach the practice from a very simple standpoint, that's quite good too.
It's kind of like the step before your question, which is when I'm doing it, I like chanting it in Tibetan. And I know the gist of the pieces, but sometimes what I'm actually chanting and what I'm actually, the part of the story I'm connecting with, are probably out of sync. And I'm kind of not getting on my case for that right now. But your clarification this morning about paying attention to the pauses and the transitions is like, yes, Cynthia, this is another reason to kind of get them in sync. Yeah. But meanwhile, it was when I started Green Tara, I mentioned to Lama Michael, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't remember all that, but I like chanting it. He says, great. So it feels like, oh, these are my baby step entries into it, but you point out where it can go, you know.
Well, the one word I'd take your hand, kind of slap it very gently when you say baby steps, as though, I would say in a certain way, there isn't such thing as baby steps in practice. It's kind of, all the steps that we take are kind of, they're grand and mature in their own way.
But it's
So
like
even
training wheels on a bike, or someone running next to me.
They're grand training wheels. It's kind of like, to give ourselves credit, and this is another way that we kind of undermine ourselves. Like we're not really giving ourselves, oh, that's just the baby steps. Oh, that's the training wheels. I mean, if we put some of these terms out and sort of then we put associations with them. So like, would you associate the word training wheels with effective, ineffective? Like which way would you grade it, to the positive? Would you grade it to the negative? It's like, no, that's the kind of dismissive. And when we say something on the other side, like advanced practice, that sounds really good. But my principle is that advanced practice is the thing that's transformative in the moment, that does something that's active in the moment, wherever you happen to be.
No matter which level.
No matter what it is, when you're engaging. And so I had a lovely image when you're talking about, like, here where the words are, but I'm over here. I was kind of, like this elastic, long kind of this bungee cord between the words are going along like this, and I'm way back here, and then I go sailing past it over there. And you're associating that with doing it in Tibetan. That very thing can happen when you're doing it in English, too. There's no guarantees about that. And there's no particular virtue in it all kind of feeling very stuck together in a particular way. If something was kind of really opening up, and you're just rocking and rolling with the chanting, and something is opening up, then you go, oh my goodness, I'm not in sync with it. I'd better stop this insight mid. Put an end to it right now.
Oh, actually, when it opens up, I just rejoice.
Yeah, that's good.
But meanwhile, I kind of know, oh, they're dancing the tune over there. I'm here.
Yeah, that's fun. But I think the thing about the transition points, just kind of like there are things to pay attention to. But even then, if the chanting goes along and you're building up the visualization, something's changed over here in the tune, and you're kind of sailing on, and you continue through it, and you kind of pick it up. That's fine. I remember once when this was in India, and somebody was being very helpful. Air quotes, very heavy, bold character, air quotes, helpful. And I was something, but we were doing the description of the visualization, which is like, and this person was kindly pointing out that I was doing the mudra in the wrong place, and I just like, leave me alone. It was going fine. So we should sort of kind of be free. It's nice if we can kind of all kind of collect our energy. Well, this is what the mudra we're doing now, but it's be more free and easy. In that you can find the precision.
In that vein, you don't have to learn many words of Tibetan in order to be able to follow along. I mean, I certainly don't read Tibetan, but you can just pick up 1 or 2 words per line.
Yeah.
You can follow along.
Yeah, there's some places where some kinds of things are very easy that way. Something like the refuge prayer, where like, well, it looks like this is the six-limb refuge, 3 jewels, 3 roots. And look, Gyapsu Chio shows up 6 times. And that's one thing that's the same in every line. I wonder if that means going for refuge. It does. Gyapsu Chio. So there are little pieces like that, that it does become easier. There are other things like the Mahamudra aspiration prayer.
That's harder.
That one is certain things I recite in Tibetan just because I just kind of enjoy it. Other things, not, because I can't get the detail. I can't get the refined piece of it that's active for me. Doesn't mean it wouldn't be active for somebody else, but we need to have a string down and put the microphone on the flying trapeze.
One of the things you reminded us of today is to do the visualization of the Bodhisattva in front before the dedication. I mean, the taking refuge, excuse me.
Yeah, refuge. Yeah.
And I had been missing that part completely. So I'm assuming that we are to do that before the longer taking of refuge prayer that comes before the short refuge prayer, we should have that whole time and then pay attention to the transition between refuge and the next prayer, which is you had us do the visualization dissolving.
Yeah, it's not like we make it dissolve. It's more like we witness. We took away the intention for it to be there. There's a space of mind, and out of that, then generosity arises.
Okay, so we take away the intention for it to be there, and so it isn't there. It's not a picture of a dissolving image.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. You also talked about the meaning of the mantra today. you know, my experience of reciting the mantra is I don't really understand it, but and sometimes I don't really know what I'm doing when I'm doing that. But if I recite the mantra, I do notice that there's this like weird kind of space or opening in my awareness that feels kind of joyful. And I wonder if that's connected to the meaning of the mantra, or is it the sound of the mantra, or can you talk about that a little bit?
You're talking about something that I think is quite particular to the dynamics that are going on just within your personally speaking, within your practice. So I wouldn't want to say, oh, that's because of this or that's because of that, because I don't have anything resembling clairvoyance.
Sure. I wonder then, maybe if you could talk about that meaning of the mantra that you talked about earlier today. Could you do that again for us, please?
Okay. The particular, there are, to preface this, there is a book called the Mani Kabum, which roughly translates as the 100,000 meanings of Om Mani Padme Hum. And this is something that I love to refer to when early on we'd get invited out to talk to people about Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and they always want, and what's the meaning of Om Mani Padme Hum? But that's a good place to start, to have the sense that there are vast you could say vast resonances that you could articulate that are in accord with the mantra, or are expressions, meanings that come out. One of the ones that I am found most helpful is the association of the six-syllable of the mantra with the six realms, wishing for the liberation of beings in all the full range of experience in samsara, from the most grueling, hellish kind, what we would label hellish, to the most refined kind of experience where we could say, and I don't even see how they could even think there's any kind of problem. So that was helpful for me. But the one that I mentioned was another one that's also helpful in terms of clarifying something about God. If we think of sometimes the mantra is talked about as the name mantra. So this is the same as the mantra is the same as Chenaezig's name. It's the same meaning as Chenaezig. It's no different than Chenaezig. It's got like 100% of the meaning of Chenaezig is in the mantra. And from that perspective, the thing that I mentioned was that the syllable Om is associated with the body of the Buddhas. And that's, oh yeah, body of the Buddhas. What on earth does that really mean? That's a good question. But in any case, the Om, body of the Buddhas, the Mani, the jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel, the activity of bodhicitta that fulfills every kind of need, undoes every kind of confusion and suffering. It's kind of the active aspect of dissolving confusion. Jewel also has that quality of being kind of a precious resource. So it's kind of there's a resourcefulness in that. And then the lotus, the Padma, Om Mani Padme, Padma, Padme, that being the aspect of being able to be in any situation, being able to be in samsara but not stained or constrained in any way by the circumstance. And this has more to do with the insight aspect. And that image itself, we tend to think of insight, or you say, oh, I see the nature of mind. It sounds kind of like, and it's empty, kind of very. But this explanation of it brings it back to, well, what does that mean in terms of a way of being? Being able to see the nature of all phenomena, the nature of awareness, means being able to be in any kind of circumstance, but not constrained by it. Not being bedraggled, not being brought down, not being inflamed, being able to have the potential of the mani, be able to be active all the time. So Om Mani Padme Om, the mind of the Buddhas. Simple to say. So that's one way to gloss it, but we can just keep on going. There I think in Bokar Rinpoche's book there are more glosses on that. And I've got more written down someplace. One or two. I was trying to not say too much today, and I already said. Dora's laughing as he says, "See how much he talks when he's trying not to talk." You can all laugh at my expense. It's fine. It was helpful for me to think, well, there's the Mani Kabul, that's all contained in the mantra. All that was 100,000 meanings. And all the meanings of the mantra are contained in the seed syllable Hri. All the form and activity of Chenaezig also contained in the seed syllable Hri. Just that spark. All the activity, all the mind states, all the possibilities contained in that spark. Oh, I thought it was perfect. I looked up and my goodness, right on the dot, 2:30. May I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. So we can take just a very brief stretch as needed, and then we'll go through the practice once.